Men have stopped approaching women, and here's the shocking part. It's not because they've lost interest. It's because the world has made it terrifying for them to even say hi. Today, men fear being labeled creepy, humiliated publicly, or misunderstood for simply showing interest. This isn't a lack of confidence. It's the result of a society that punishes men for trying. We are watching a silent collapse of connection between men and women, and no one is talking about it. But today we will. Men today aren't silent because they've lost interest in women. They're silent because approaching a woman has become one of the biggest social risks a man can take. And when I talk about risk, I'm not talking about rejection in the traditional sense. I'm talking about the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being judged, the fear of being labeled something he never intended to be. This fear has become so deeply rooted in men that even those who genuinely admire a woman from afar will suppress that instinct, swallow that desire, and walk away quietly. Not out of weakness, but out of emotional self-protection. You see, when a man approaches a woman, he's not just putting his interest on the line. He's putting his entire character on trial. One wrong word, one poorly timed compliment, one misread signal, and suddenly he's not a man trying to be courteous or respectful. He's creepy, and for a man, that label is heavy, it sticks. It echoes. It follows him psychologically long after the moment has passed. Men don't fear women, they fear being misinterpreted. They fear that their genuine intentions will be painted as something darker, something inappropriate, something predatory. And once that fear gets into a man's mind, it doesn't leave easily. Think about how often you see videos online of men being mocked, recorded, or ridiculed for simply starting a conversation. How many times do you see women posting screenshots of DM for entertainment, turning someone's vulnerability into public comedy? Men internalize this. They learn that expressing interest is not just a moment, it's a potential public spectacle. So instead of risking judgment, they choose silence. Instead of approaching, they choose distance. Instead of speaking, they choose to stay invisible. Now, it's important to understand men aren't asking for perfection. They're not asking for guaranteed acceptance. They're simply asking for fairness, for the benefit of the doubt, for the understanding that not every approach comes with an agenda. Not every conversation has hidden motives. Many men genuinely admire the character, the energy, the presence of a woman. But admiration today feels dangerous, even kindness feels loaded, so men start second, guessing themselves. What if she thinks I'm invading her space? What if she gets offended? What if I make her uncomfortable? What if she calls me out publicly? And these questions don't come from insecurity, they come from the emotional climate we've created. When a man is constantly told to respect boundaries, he tries, but the problem is that the boundaries aren't clear. They shift from person to person, moment to moment, mood to mood. What one woman finds flattering, another finds intrusive. What one woman considers confidence, another sees, and men are expected to somehow guess correctly every time. This uncertainty becomes mentally exhausting. The fear of crossing an invisible line becomes stronger than the desire to connect. So men retreat deep down. Men just want to be understood too. They want to feel like their interest isn't a threat, like their approach isn't automatically suspicious. They want to feel safe being men imperfect, human, genuine. And when society keeps telling them be respectful, be careful, be cautious, don't make the first move unless she gives a sign, they realize something painful. Even the act of trying has become a burden, so they stop trying, because for many men today, silence feels safer than sincerity. Distance feels safer than effort, isolation feels safer than misinterpretation, and that is why men no longer approach. Not because they don't want to, but because the world taught them it's safer not to. Rejection today is not what rejection used to be. There was a time when a man could approach a woman, express interest, and even if she didn't feel the same, the exchange ended respectfully. There was dignity on both sides. Today, rejection carries a different weight, sharp, public, performative, and often humiliating, and men feel this shift more deeply than people realize. They don't fear hearing no. They fear the way that no is delivered, exaggerated, displayed, or weaponized. A modern rejection isn't just a quiet moment between two people. It can turn into a story shared with friends, screenshots sent in group chats, or even an online post mocking the man who dared to try. Men have seen it again and again, private vulnerability turned into public entertainment. And after witnessing enough of these situations, they start to internalize a very simple yet painful message. Approaching a woman today doesn't just risk emotional discomfort, it risks public embarrassment. Imagine being a man who gathers all his courage, walks up respectfully, speaks politely, and still ends up being laughed at with her friends the moment he walks away. Imagine having genuine interest but being dismissed with sarcasm, eye rolls, or worse, being treated like he's unworthy of even basic civility. These reactions don't just sting, they shape a man's behavior for years. He remembers the tone, the expression, the mockery, and that memory becomes a barrier he carries into every future interaction. This new harshness didn't appear out of nowhere. Social media created a culture where everything is content. Everything is shared, everything is used for attention. Men feel like every move they make is being watched, judged, and possibly turned into a joke. The risk isn't emotional anymore, it's social, and social consequences cut deeper than rejection because they follow you long after the moment has passed. Men don't expect every woman to be interested, they don't expect approval, but they do hope for humanity. They hope for kindness, they hope that their effort, no matter how small, is met with respect. When rejection becomes cruel or dismissive, it chips away at a man's confidence, not because he feels entitled to a yes, but because he expected a basic level of decency. And when that decency repeatedly disappears, men stop taking the risk altogether. There is also a growing fear that the act of approaching itself might be misinterpreted. If a woman doesn't like him, it's not just "I'm not interested." It often becomes, "Why is he talking to me?" or "He's weird for thinking he has a chance." The problem isn't the rejection. It's the unnecessary commentary attached to it. It's the implication that the man should have known his place without even trying. And that kind of messaging attacks a man's self-worth at the core. So eventually he withdraws. He chooses silence over humiliation, distance over risk, solitude over potential ridicule. Because for many men today, it is not worth approaching someone when the consequence of a simple misalignment can become a spectacle. They don't want to be the punchline of a joke, or the subject of a post, or the story told at someone else's amusement. They don't want their vulnerability turned into content. This isn't about fragility, it's about self-respect. Men protect themselves the same way anyone does when the environment becomes hostile. They step back. They stay quiet. They stop trying, not because they lack courage, not because they don't value women, but because they've learned that in today's world, saying hello can cost more than rejection. It can cost their dignity, and that is why rejection today pushes men into silence, not because they fear the word no, but because they fear the cruelty that often comes with it. Social media has changed everything, especially the way men and women see each other. It's not just a platform anymore. It has become a stage, a marketplace, a comparison engine, and a constant reminder of what you supposedly deserve. And for men, approaching women in real life has become far more intimidating because they feel like they are competing with an entire digital universe that they can never measure up to. When a woman receives endless validation online, likes, comments, messages, emojis, attention from hundreds or even thousands of strangers, what can a real man standing in front of her possibly offer that she hasn't already seen? Men feel this deeply. They feel like real life interest no longer carries value because digital admiration is louder, faster, and never ending. A man used to be appreciated for his presence, his voice, his confidence, his character. Today, all of that is overshadowed by filtered photos, curated lifestyles, and constant attention from people who don't even know her, but are willing to say anything to impress her. And men look at this and think, how do I compete with a fantasy? Because that's what social media often is, a highlight reel of perfection that no real human can match. This creates an internal conflict in men. On one hand, they want to approach. They want to be genuine, real, grounded. On the other hand, they worry that their effort will seem small compared to flashy messages or exaggerated compliments women receive online. They fear being seen as boring, ordinary, or not enough. And the sad part is many men have already experienced this exact dismissal. They've approached women respectfully, but their effort felt insignificant next to the constant online validation she was used to. That sting stays with them. It makes future approaches feel pointless before they even begin. Social media didn't just raise standards, it disconnected women from understanding real men. When you're exposed to flawless pictures, wealthy influencers, and men presenting their best 2% of themselves online, it's easy to unconsciously start expecting every man to come with that same level of perfection, but men aren't perfect, they're human, and approaching a woman in real life requires courage, vulnerability, and sincerity. Qualities that the digital world no longer celebrates. For men, it becomes exhausting. They feel like they are walking into a competition they never signed up for. A competition where they're judged not by their authenticity, but by how they compare to what she sees on her screen. The truth is, when a man stands in front of a woman, he wants her to see him, not the filtered world she's constantly scrolling through. But today, he fears that she won't. He fears she'll compare him. He fears she'll overlook him. He fears she'll assume there's always someone better, richer, taller, funnier, more handsome, or more interesting just a swipe away. So men withdraw not out of insecurity, but out of exhaustion, not out of lack of interest, but out of emotional self-preservation. And this is the part many people overlook. Men don't want to compete with illusions, they want to connect with reality. But when reality feels undervalued, they choose silence, they choose distance, they choose peace. Men aren't intimidated by women. They're intimidated by the unrealistic expectations shaped by a world that thrives on exaggeration. And that is why social media has made men more hesitant than ever, not because they don't want connection, but because they no longer know if their reality is enough for someone lost in a fantasy. One of the biggest unspoken reasons men have stopped approaching women today is the growing confusion created by mixed signals. Signals that leave men unsure, hesitant, and mentally exhausted, and this confusion isn't coming from bad intentions. It's coming from a world where expectations shift every day, where what's considered respectful one moment is criticized the next. Men constantly hear the message, be confident, be bold, make the first move, yet just as often they witness those same bold men being judged, criticized, or mocked for doing exactly that. It leaves them wondering, what do women really want from us? When a man approaches, he tries to read signals that aren't clear because so many women today live behind emotional walls created from their own past hurts. And those walls are understandable. Women have been through experiences that made them guarded, cautious, and less open. But men don't always see the reason behind that guard, they only see the reaction. They see the distance, the coldness, the avoidance, and they assume they're unwanted, unwelcome, or even irritating. A man cannot always decode whether a woman is uninterested, shy, scared, overwhelmed, or simply protecting her heart. And that uncertainty alone is enough to stop many men from even trying. Then comes the contradiction men face daily. Women say they appreciate confidence, yet when a man confidently approaches, the reaction can sometimes be defensive or dismissive. Women say they value effort, but when a man puts in effort, it can be interpreted as too much, too soon, too intense. Women say they want men to be real, yet when a man shows genuine interest, it can be labeled as clingy or desperate. These mixed messages create emotional fatigue in men because they try to adapt, only to be told they're doing it wrong, no matter which approach they take. Even more confusing is the fact that women often give subtle hints, hoping men will get it, but men are wired differently. Men don't operate on subtlety, they operate on clarity. A quick smile, a glance, a small gesture. Women see these as green lights, but men don't always recognize them. And even when they do, they're terrified of misreading the situation, because if they assume a hint that wasn't actually a hint, they risk embarrassment or causing discomfort. So many men choose not to act at all, and let's not pretend men are the only ones confused. Women are equally tired. Tired of men approaching disrespectfully, tired of feeling objectified, tired of mixed messages coming from men as well. This mutual exhaustion creates a disconnect where both sides feel misunderstood, yet neither side fully communicates what they want. Women want to feel safe, men want to feel welcome, women want connection, men want direction. But because neither side expresses these needs clearly, the approach becomes a gamble men no longer want to take. The truth is, men aren't asking for perfection. They're not asking for guaranteed acceptance. They're simply asking for clarity. They want to know when interest is mutual and when it isn't. They want to approach without worrying if they're crossing a line they didn't know existed. They want to understand what women actually want, not what society tells women to say they want. When the rules keep changing, men stop playing the game not because they don't care, but because the emotional cost becomes too high. So they back away from approaching, they stay in their lane. They mind their own business, not because they've given up on women, but because they've grown tired of trying to navigate a world where every step feels like it could be the wrong one. And that is why confusion and mixed signals push men into silence, not because they don't want connection, but because they no longer know which signals are real. For generations, men have been told it's their responsibility to take the first step to initiate, pursue, lead, and carry the weight of starting a connection. And for a long time they did. They approached even when scared, they tried even when unsure, and they risked rejection because that was simply what was expected of them. But today, the world has changed, the dynamics have shifted, and men are starting to question why the burden still falls entirely on them in a society that claims to value equality. They're tired not because they're weak, but because they're finally aware of the emotional toll that always being the initiator has taken on them. You can't expect a man to carry the responsibility of approaching while also asking him to navigate a world where every approach feels dangerous, judged, or unreciprocated. Men look around and see women demanding partnership, balance, and shared effort. But when it comes to the very first step, suddenly the roles become traditional again. And men feel this inconsistency deeply. They think, if we're equal now, why am I still the only one expected to risk embarrassment, confusion, or rejection? They don't say it out loud, but they feel it. The truth is, men want to feel chosen too. They want to feel desired. They want to feel like someone saw them and thought, he's worth the effort. But many men go through life never experiencing that feeling even once. They've been conditioned to believe they must always be the pursuer, the one who tries, the one who initiates, while women wait, assess, and decide. And in the modern world, where emotional connection already feels fragile, that dynamic becomes even heavier. Men aren't stepping back because they expect women to do everything now. They're stepping back because they want partnership, not performance. They want reciprocity, not pressure. They want to feel like they're not the only ones carrying the emotional risk. When a man approaches a woman, he's putting his heart, ego, and dignity on the line. It may look simple from the outside, but internally it's a battle overcoming fear, worrying about being judged, hoping for kindness. And when men see very little effort coming back in return, it starts to feel one-sided and draining. This isn't about blaming women, it's about understanding both sides. Women have their own fears, fear of choosing the wrong person, fear of appearing too eager, fear of being judged for showing interest first, but men also have fears that often go unnoticed. They fear humiliation, they fear misinterpretation, they fear rejection that cuts so deep it rewrites how they see themselves. And the more men experience these wounds, the more they wonder why they're the only ones required to be brave. Men look at modern relationships now and ask themselves, where is the balance? They aren't asking women to chase them. They're asking for a gesture, a signal, a sign of mutual investment, something that shows you're not doing this alone. Because when men get nothing, no hint, no initiative, no acknowledgement, it starts to feel like their role is to constantly prove themselves while women simply evaluate. And that dynamic doesn't build connection. It builds resentment, pressure, and emotional fatigue. The truth is, men don't mind taking the lead. Many enjoy it, but they do mind feeling like they're expected to carry the entire emotional weight while receiving very little reassurance. They want effort, warmth, and vulnerability on the other side. They want to feel like someone is meeting them halfway. Because when a man feels like he's the only one trying, his heart slowly closes, not because he doesn't care, but because caring alone becomes too heavy. And that is why men have grown hesitant to approach, not because they refuse responsibility, but because they're tired of being the only ones taking the first